This year is about pursuing something great. This year is about the dream that I've had for as long as I can remember. This year is not about showing up. It's about making a statement. Trust me when I say this. The time is now. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the YouTube channel. Hope everyone is well. I'm great, thank you for asking. So today, in today's video, today's sit-down video, if you're new here, these are the kind of videos we do at least once a week, maybe sometimes twice a week. And it's ultimately just like a sit-down video where we break down a topic and just talk about those things. Not necessarily in like masses of detail, but just enough so that everyone can pretty much understand them. So today's video, obviously like the title says, I'm gonna talk about what rep ranges should you be training in order for you to build muscle. Now, if we look at this scientifically, which is pretty much the first place where you should be looking, it's like, what does the science say? Well, there's a pretty definitive conclusion in science that you can actually grow and induce hypertrophy, create hypertrophic response from a pretty wide range of rep ranges. And that goes from anywhere from about 5-6 reps all the way up until 40 reps. So then it just becomes about considering what does it mean to train within those rep ranges? What does it mean to train between, you know, that 6 and 10 level, that 10 to 15 level, that 15 to 30 level? What are the implications and what are the things that you should consider? Because yes, you can grow at 5 reps and you can grow at 40 reps, but which one, you know, would you want to be progressing for a very long time? You know, potentially the 5 reps, because actually you can just push the weight up rather than like doing 40 reps with 20 kilos and having to go to 21 kilos, and like it's, the rate of progression seems a little bit inefficient. So we're just going to break down like the small rep range, the middle rep range, and the larger rep ranges, and just kind of what they potentially mean for impact into your training and potentially when you'd use them. So we'll start with the heaviest range of motion. So between 6 and 10 reps, or 5 and 10 reps if you want to include that 5 and you're like a 5 repper. This is kind of what would be naturally associated with a little bit more strength orientated. This would be very, very good for like year-on-year progress, because a big focus of it is like weight on bar. Like, did you do more weight on the bar than last time and the same or more amount of reps? Yes. It becomes very, very progressible. There is a little bit of impact on your joints. So that's something to consider if perhaps you're injured or have had an injury, that actually training in a heavier rep range. Because bearing in mind, when we say training in a heavier rep range, a lighter rep range, and a lightest rep range, those are all within the parameters of training a certain intensity. And that intensity is about a 7 out of 10. If 10 was you could not lift that bar if I had a gun to your head, you know, training above a 7 is a pretty good idea all the time, even pushing your way up to a 10 sometimes. I personally just train at 10. That's a video for another day. So that all of these rep ranges come within that constraints of minimum intensity. So we're not even going to mention the minimum intensity because this is taking that. So if you're doing that minimum intensity between a 5 and 10 rep range, you can guarantee that if you become a strong, big person, for example, I've been known to be quite strong and been known to quite big. Not the biggest, not the strongest, but I've bench pressed 70 kilo dumbbells for multiple reps, 75 kilo dumbbells for multiple reps. You know, 7 plates on hack squats, on presses and shoulder presses, things like that. So there is a lot of toll on the joints and in turn on the ligaments and the tendons and the whole joint structure. So you've got to consider that in your training. If you do have niggles, if you do have if you do have injuries, then potentially that heavier rep range is something you want to limit your time in. But if you feel good, if you progress well in that rep range, then maybe you just want to, it's potentially where you want to spend more time in. So as we look at potentially when you'd use that, we know they're going to be pretty taxing because of the heavy weight. So there's going to be a little bit more central nervous system load with those type of reps, those 6 to 10 reps. So we know that you're going to be doing less of them potentially. Obviously you're doing less reps as well, but you're going to be doing less of them, less exercises at that rep range than potentially the rest of them. So this is where you'll probably use your big compound exercises. Heavier rep ranges generally, you know, become with heavier weight. More often than not, you need a little bit more stability. So as we move up that scale into like the middle range, this can be associated with, you know what, this is actually quite a good rep range, 10 to 20, let's say, to learn a movement, to get good at it. To get very good at a movement, you need to do it a lot of times. So doing 1 rep maxes, 3 rep maxes is not like conducive to getting better at the lift. So that'd be more towards like, you could look like if you had like a beginner, there's no need to set them a like 9 out of 10 failure heavy squat for 5 or 6 reps on their first ever time in the gym, even for the first year maybe, because a lot of that first, you know, initial few years of your bodybuilding career is learning the movements, how to do them properly. So it can be associated with like a little bit less central nervous system fatigue because it's not as heavy weight, but you're still going to get a very big whack of stimulus because it's still heavy weight. You know, you can, you know, especially as you become stronger on those kind of heavier rep ranges, you get stronger on those middle rep ranges. Very, very good for kind of long-term hypertrophy as well. You know, I personally, this is my favorite rep range because it's not so heavy that potentially it puts a lot of overstress on those joints. And it's light enough for you to remain very structurally sound. It's not so heavy that you're fighting for those reps that sometimes we do and we have to. It doesn't mean that you should do it, but sometimes we do. So it remains a little bit safer. It feels a little bit more accurate for me. So I do slightly more of my volume within that rep range because it is taxing, yes, but also I feel like it's my most bang for my buck, just in terms of having a good heavy amount of weight on there, not having to do loads and loads of reps. So my heart rate's high, my cardiovascular ability is brought in. And also it's very progressible for a very long period of time. And then as we move into that final rep range, that kind of like 20 to 40, which we know the science says, yes, you can grow there. For me personally, you'd only do this on isolation movements, and potentially, there are some other cases when you wouldn't, but potentially only when you've had like injuries or you're coming back from an injury, because the amount of reps that you need to do to incur the stimulus is very, very time consuming. It's also a little bit more cardiovascularly challenging. It also is like quite hard to progress that over the long term. You know, like if you're doing 40 rep sets, it is fun to do. And actually, once you've achieved that adaptation to those 40 reps, potentially that kind of muscle building stimulus, it gets kind of regressed a little bit. There is a place for higher rep ranges, absolutely. I make sure I try to do a higher rep range at least 2 or 3 times a week across the board, to like maybe 1 push, 1 pull, 1 legs at some point, or at least an intensity technique that gets me above like 15, 20 reps. Because we know we can grow up there, I kind of feel like you should just cover it. But because of the, I don't want to say inefficiency, but like maybe the time consuming, the lack of progression over the long term, the hard way to progress that over the long term, I'd probably do this the least. Behind even potentially the heavyweights, just in terms of actual hypertrophy building potential and actually like the longevity of that progression. I feel like the most of your weight should be put into that middle rep range, some of it into that heavy rep range, and then like the last little bits. You know, everyone likes to get a pump, everyone likes to have a bit of fun, drop sets, supersets, that all falls within that heavy rep range there, which we know that all three, with the minimum intensity required, with the minimum form required, will all cause hypertrophy. So if we know that this rep range, and this rep range all can potentially build muscle, but to what degree is very difficult to decide. And you need a lot of rigorous testing in very, very set circumstances. Why not just do all of them? You know, don't cut yourself short by staying in one of those. I think that you should cover all of them at some point. So I'm gonna leave that there. I didn't want to go like too deep into it. You can go a little bit deeper. People like Renaissance Periodization with Mike Israetel go into it in a lot of detail if you guys wanna go into that a little bit more. You know, I'll link the video in the description as well. It's a really, really good video to go off it. I've learned a lot of stuff from those guys, and they give out like universe higher, like, you know, master degree level stuff for free on YouTube. So check them out. If you guys enjoy this type of video, let me know, drop a comment, let me know what you want to see next. We will see you soon. It's time to go home and eat. See you guys. Peace.